Mara Fen had buried the elf sailor 7 years ago without a body, a coffin, or the courage to admit she had loved him. Then, on the worst storm night Gull's End had seen in a generation, someone knocked 3 times on her cottage door. When she opened it, Captain Kalen Reese stood beneath the lightning, with seawater pouring from his silver hair, an old brass compass clenched in one blue hand, and the same impossible green eyes she had watched disappear beyond the harbor. He looked exactly as he had on the morning his ship went down. He also looked half drowned. "I told the sea I was coming home," he whispered. Then he fell across her threshold. Mara caught his shoulders and nearly went down with him. Kalen had always been lean rather than heavy, built like a mast designed to bend without breaking. Now his soaked coat dragged at her arms, and his skin was so cold it burned. She hauled him inside by the collar, kicked the door shut against the wind, and stood over the man the entire coast had mourned. For a moment she could do nothing but stare. His face had not aged. Elves age slowly, but 7 years should still have left something. A line beside the eyes, a change in the mouth, a little distance between the man remembered and the man returned. Kalen's sharp cheekbones, pale lashes, and long pointed ears were exactly as they had been. A thin scar crossed his lower lip, the same scar he had earned when a boom struck him during his first voyage. His silver-white hair reached his shoulders in wet ropes. Only his hands were different. Dark blue veins traced his fingers and disappeared beneath his sleeves, moving faintly with the rhythm of waves. He was not breathing. "No," Mara said. She dropped beside him and pressed both hands against his chest. Once, twice, again. His ribs felt solid beneath the wet wool. She tilted his head, pinched his nose, and forced air into lungs that had no right to be silent. On the 5th push, Kalen convulsed. Seawater burst from his mouth, far too much of it. He coughed until a shining pool spread across Mara's floorboards, though there could not have been an ocean inside one body. She rolled him onto his side and held him while he dragged in a ragged breath. His eyes opened. Mara. Hearing her name in his voice hurt more than finding him dead would have. She slapped him. The sound cracked through the cottage. Kalen blinked up at her. "I may have deserved that." "You think?" "I was hoping for a slightly warmer welcome." "You arrived as a corpse. This is the welcome corpses get." Thunder shook the windows. Kalen's eyes closed again, but this time his chest continued to move. Mara sat back on her heels. Her hand trembled from the slap. She wanted to strike him again. She wanted to wrap both arms around him and make sure the storm could never pull him away. She did neither. She had spent 7 years learning to live without Captain Kalen Reese. She would not forget the lesson in 7 minutes. The cottage had one main room, a sleeping loft, and a black iron stove that smoked whenever the wind came from the east. Nets hung from the rafters. Oilskins dripped beside the door. A shelf held jars of salt, lamp wicks, hooks, and the small practical things that kept fishermen alive. Mara fed the stove until the iron glowed. She cut Kalen's coat from his body because the silver clasps had rusted shut. Beneath it, his linen shirt was torn and clung to him like another layer of skin. "If you wake and complain about the knife," she muttered, "I will finish what the sea started." His mouth moved. "That sounds like you. Be unconscious properly." She sliced the shirt from collar to hem. 7 years beneath the sea had left no softness on him. His chest and stomach were taut, his shoulders marked by old sailing scars. But from his left hip to the center of his chest, a pattern of dark blue lines curved beneath his skin. They resembled the ribs of some enormous sea creature. The marks brightened whenever waves struck the cliffs outside. At the center of his chest was a circle no larger than a coin, black as the deepest water. Mara did not touch it. She dried him, wrapped him in every blanket she owned, and dragged the narrow mattress closer to the stove. The brass compass remained locked in his fist. When she tried to take it, his fingers tightened despite his unconsciousness. She knew that compass. It had belonged to her father. The casing was dented near the hinge, and the glass held a pale scratch shaped like a gull's wing. Mara had lent it to Kaelin on the morning the Moonwake departed Gull's End, 7 years before. "Bring it back," she had told him. Kaelin had smiled down at her from the gangplank. His hair was tied at the nape, his sea-green coat bright against the dawn. "Is it the compass you want, Mara Fen? Or the sailor carrying it?" She had been 26 and too proud to answer. The Moonwake sailed before sunrise. 3 days later, wreckage washed ashore along 40 miles of coast. No survivors were found. The Elven Admiralty declared the ship lost in a sudden storm. For 7 years, Mara had hated herself for leaving his question unanswered. Now the compass needle spun wildly beneath the scratched glass. It did not point north. It pointed at her. By dawn, the storm had passed. Kaelin slept without moving. Mara sat at the table with a gutting knife across her knees and watched the light creep through the shutters. She had not closed her eyes. When church bells rang from the village, Kaelin stopped breathing again. Mara reached him before his skin cooled. This time, one hard press to his chest brought up a mouthful of brine. He gasped and seized her wrist. "How long?" he asked. "Since you stopped breathing? Or since you ruined my floor?" "Since the Moonwake." She looked at him. 7 years. His grip loosened. "No," he said. 7 years and 19 days. It was 6 weeks. For you, perhaps. He stared toward the shuttered window. The blue lines across his chest shifted under his skin. Mara stood. People searched until winter. The Admiralty held a memorial in Latharis. Gull's End carved 12 names into the harbor wall. Yours is at the top, because elves enjoy being first even at their own funerals. Mara. My father died 3 years ago. Leo married the cooper's daughter. The old West Pier collapsed. The herring moved north. And your Admiralty bought half our boats after raising the harbor tax. Is there any other news you would like before breakfast? Pain entered his face. Not the sharp pain of a wound. Something quieter and more difficult to forgive. Your father, he said. I am sorry. You do not get to be sorry yet. No. You get to explain why a dead elf is lying on my mattress with my compass. Kaelin pushed himself upright. The blanket slipped to his waist, exposing the tide marks over his chest. He looked down at them as if he had forgotten they were there. I cannot explain all of it. Mara picked up the knife. That was poorly phrased, he said. Try again. The Moonwake did not sink in a natural storm. We found something in the western water, something the Admiralty had been searching for. My first officer tried to take it. I stopped him. The sea stopped all of us. What did you find? His gaze shifted to the window again. Kaelin. A debt. The waves struck the cliffs below the cottage. Every dark line on his body flashed. He doubled over. Mara dropped the knife and caught him. Water streamed from his mouth onto her shoulder. His body shook violently beneath her hands. What is happening? Too far, he managed. From what? The tide. Mara's cottage stood 50 paces from the cliff edge. She had never considered it far from the sea in her life. Kaylin collapsed back against the mattress. When the tide turns, it pulls me with it. You came to the wrong house. He looked up at her, breathing hard. No. The certainty in that one word made her step away. A fist struck the door. Mara, called Leo Fen. You alive in there? Her younger brother never knocked when one loud blow would do. Kaylin reached instinctively for a weapon that was not at his side. Mara threw the blanket over him. Do not move. I am unlikely to run. Do not speak either. She opened the door just enough to block the room with her body. Leo stood on the step in a red wool cap, his beard shining with rain. He was broad, sun-browned, and permanently smelled of smoked herring. Behind him, half the village was examining storm damage along the lane. Your chimney still standing? He asked. Mostly. Nella saw a man come up from the cliff last night. Nella sees saints in potato skins. She said he had silver hair. Mara did not blink. Leo leaned closer. You have seawater all over your floor. The roof leaks. From below? A floorboard creaked behind her. Leo pushed the door wider before she could stop him. Kaylin stood beside the stove, wrapped in a gray blanket, bare chest visible above it, silver hair damp around his pointed ears. He looked pale enough to haunt a lighthouse. Leo made a small sound. Then he punched Kaylin in the mouth. The elf hit the wall and took a hanging net down with him. Leo! He is dead! That does not make punching him sensible. He was dead at Father's table for 7 years. He was dead while you sat on the harbor wall every night like an idiot. He was dead when— Enough! Leo stopped. Kaylin untangled himself from the net. Blood brightened his lower lip. That one I may also have deserved. Do elves grow back after drowning? Leo demanded. Not usually. Pity. By noon, every person in Gull's End knew Captain Kaylin Reese had returned. They crowded outside Mara's cottage, despite the wet wind. Some came from curiosity. Others carried iron hooks, salt, or charms against the drowned. Old Nella insisted Kaylin had no reflection. A boy proved her wrong with his mother's hand mirror, then dropped it when Kaylin winked at him. The village reeve wanted to lock Kaylin in the net house until an elven official arrived. Mara refused. He may be dangerous, Reeve Tomas said. He can barely stand. The storm brought him. The storm also brought half a tree through your chicken shed. Are you locking that up? Kaylin remained behind her, one hand braced against the doorframe. The morning tide had turned, and color was slowly returning to his face. An old fisherman named Esben pushed forward through the crowd. He had sailed on human ships for 50 years and trusted the sea only slightly more than he trusted elves. Show us your teeth, he told Kaylin. Kaylin raised an eyebrow. Why? Drowned men have black gums. Who told you that? A drowned man? That seems unreliable. Despite themselves, several villagers laughed. Then a bell began ringing from the harbor. Not the church bell, the warning bell. Everyone turned toward the water. The sea had retreated beyond the reef. Gull's End harbor lay empty under a white noon sky, its fishing boats tilted in the mud. Crabs scuttled across ground that had been under 30 feet of water minutes before. Beyond the exposed reef, a dark wall stretched across the horizon. The tide marks on Kaylin's chest burned through the blanket. Get to high ground, he said. No one moved. His voice changed. The dry humor vanished, leaving the command of the captain he had been. Now! The village ran. Mara and Leo freed the boats from their moorings before the returning water could smash them against the pier. Kaylin staggered down the cliff path behind them. With every step toward the harbor, he grew stronger. The dark wall rose. That is not a tide, Leo said. Kalen waded into the mud until seawater reached his boots. He lifted both hands. The waves struck the reef. For a breath, it towered over Gull's End, green-black and filled with pale shapes that moved like fingers. Kalen spoke a word in an elven tongue older than maps. The black circle over his heart opened like an eye. The wave divided. 2 mountains of water thundered past either side of the harbor, tearing stones from the cliffs and flooding the lower fields. Between them, Gull's End remained untouched. Kalen fell to his knees. Mara reached him as the sea returned around his body. It curled over his legs without foam, almost gentle now. "What did you bring to my village?" she asked. His face was gray with exhaustion. "I did not bring it." "Then why did it know your name?" He looked at her. "Because it owns part of me." The villagers heard. Fear moved through them faster than the water. Mara got Kalen back to the cottage before anyone decided ownership by the sea was reason enough for a hanging. She barred the door, lit the stove, and poured 2 cups of her father's plum liquor. Kalen drank his in one swallow. "That remains terrible," he said. "Father improved it." "How?" "He stopped offering it to guests." Mara kept her own cup between her hands. "Tell me everything." "You will send me away." "That depends on how much of my floor you intend to flood." "Mara." "No more pieces, no more debts without names. If the sea is going to tear apart my village because you knocked on my door, I deserve the whole truth." Kalen sat across from her at the small table. He had borrowed one of Leo's shirts, though it pulled across his shoulders and left the tide marks visible at his throat. "The Elven Admiralty has controlled the winds along this coast for almost a century," he began. "That is why their ships cross in winter, while human boats wait for spring. They say elven sails are better made." "They are. They also cheat." Mara leaned back. "Now I know you nearly drowned. An elf just admitted humans were not responsible for something." His mouth almost smiled. "Long ago, sailors made a covenant with the keeper below, the oldest will beneath these waters. In exchange for safe passage, no nation would bind the currents or take more from the sea than it could restore. The covenant was kept for 900 years. Then Admiral Valor found the tide heart. A jewel? Not exactly. It is a pearl grown around the final breath of the first storm. With it, Valor learned to bend trade winds. He hid the theft from the crown and used the Admiralty to make Litharis rich. Ports that challenged his tolls lost ships. Human fleets arrived late. Fishing grounds moved. Mara thought of the herring running north, the rising harbor tax, the boats sold one by one. And the moonwake found proof. "We found the tide heart itself. My first officer, Sarek, served Valor. He ordered the crew to return it to the Admiralty. I tried to take it back to the keeper below." Sarek drew his sword. "The storm came before either of us won." Kalen looked at the compass in his hand. "The ship broke on a place called the Drowned Reach. It exists outside ordinary tides. 6 weeks passed there, while 7 years passed here. The crew died one by one, some in the wreck, some when they tried to cross the water. Sarek survived. He made a bargain and escaped with the tide heart. I made a different bargain to follow him." "What bargain?" He opened the borrowed shirt. The black circle over his heart pulsed. "I carry the keeper's claim. Until the tide heart is returned, I belong to the water between sunset and dawn. I cannot remain far from the coast when the tide turns. I cannot refuse when the keeper calls. And every night I fail to recover what was stolen, the sea will search for me more violently." Mara's fingers tightened around the cup. "Where is Sarek?" "With Admiral Valor. He commands the Admiralty cutter Brightspear." Then why are you here instead of following him? Kaylin placed the old brass compass on the table. Its needle swung toward Mara. Because when I escaped the Reach, I had no chart, no stars, and no memory of the coast. This was the only thing that moved. It points at me. Yes. Why? On the morning I left Gull's End, you told me to bring it back. I promised myself I would return it to your hand. The Reach took every direction from me except that promise. Mara stared at the scratched glass. You could have promised to save your crew. I did. The Reach took that direction too. The quiet grief in his voice silenced her anger for a moment. Kaylin looked at her across the table. I came to your door because it was the only place in the world that still meant home. Her throat tightened. 7 years ago, she would have given anything to hear that. 7 years ago, she had imagined him returning with her father's compass and an answer in his smile. But the woman she had been did not know how long hope could hurt after it stopped being useful. You never lived here, she said. No. You spent 12 days in Gull's End. 15. You slept on your ship. Most nights. Mara remembered one night in the boat shed during a rainstorm, Kaylin close enough to kiss, and both of them pretending to be more interested in a torn sail. A door is not a home because you wanted it to be, she said. I know. His answer held no defense. That made it worse. Someone struck the shutters with a stone. Drowned thing! A voice shouted from the lane. Go back to the sea! Kaylin did not turn his head. Mara rose, opened the door, and threw her untouched plum liquor into Reeve Tomas's face. The crowd scattered before she found a second cup. That evening, Kaylin tried to leave. Mara found him at the cliff path, wearing his ruined coat and carrying a borrowed knife. The sunset painted the sea copper behind him. Where are you going? To find a boat. You will not find one. I told the harbor master to hide the oars. That is surprisingly effective. Gull's End has survived tax collectors, 3 pirate raids, and a bishop who tried to ban dancing. We know how to make people unwelcome. The sea will come again tonight. Then we prepare. It will keep coming. Then you find this Tideheart. Valor's cutter carries 30 armed sailors and enough wind magic to outrun a royal falcon. I have a knife that smells of onions. That is Leo's fish knife. It always smells of onions. Kaylin looked toward the horizon. The humor left his face. If I stay, people will die. If you go alone, you will die. Again. I found it inconvenient the first time. He turned to her. Sunset caught in his green eyes, making them look almost gold. Why are you helping me? Mara folded her arms. You owe me a compass. It is on your table. Then I have not decided. For the first time since he returned, Kaylin smiled fully. It was a dangerous smile, slow and bright, and familiar enough to uncover everything she had buried. The sea pulled at him before she could look away. His body arched. The black mark over his heart spread like spilled ink, and he stumbled toward the cliff. Mara caught his arm. Cold shot through her fingers. For an instant, she stood beneath miles of black water. She heard whale song, snapping masts, and thousands of drowned voices whispering one word. Return. Kaylin tore free before the vision dragged her under. Do not touch the mark after sunset, he gasped. Useful advice to give before sunset. He staggered toward the edge. Mara stepped in front of him. Move. No. I cannot control it. Then learn. Mara, please. The word frightened her more than a command would have. She pulled her father's compass from her pocket and opened it between them. The needle snapped toward her. You crossed 7 years of water following this. Follow it now. Kaylin's eyes fixed on the needle. The wind roared around them. The sea below lifted in long, dark arms. His face tightened with pain, but he took one step away from the cliff, then another. Mara walked backward toward the cottage, holding the compass where he could see it. By the time they reached the door, Kaylin was shaking. She guided him inside without touching the mark and shut out the sea. The windows rattled until midnight. He remained on the floor beside the door, one hand locked around her wrist and his forehead pressed against her palm. Neither of them mentioned it in the morning. Mara owned the smallest working fishing boat in Gull's End. The Storm Petrel was 24 feet from bow to stern, with one patched red sail, a shallow cabin, and a hull her father had built before Mara learned to walk. She was quick in narrow water and too ugly to attract thieves. She leaks, Kaylin said. She breathes. Through the hull? It keeps the wood flexible. He crouched beside the keel, examining a line of pitch. Daylight had weakened the tide marks, though blue still traced the veins of his hands. This repair is made from sailcloth and fish glue. It survived last winter. So did I. That does not make either of us seaworthy. Mara kicked his boot. For the next 2 days, they repaired the Storm Petrel together. Kaylin worked with the ease of a sailor who had spent more years on deck than land. He replaced 2 warped ribs, mended the red sail, and adjusted the rigging until Mara could raise it one-handed. Mara recut the nets, packed water and saltfish, and pretended she did not notice every time his borrowed shirt pulled tight across his back. The village watched from a distance. Leo watched from much closer. If he eats you, he told Mara while Kaylin was beneath the hull, I will say I warned you. If he eats me, I will be unable to appreciate it. Elves do not eat humans, Kaylin called from under the boat. Leo frowned. Your ears are too long. They are pointed, not deaf. At low tide, Kaylin taught 3 children an elven knot that could be released with one pull. By afternoon, they had tied Reeve Tomas's trousers to a piling. Mara began to understand why Cruz had followed him across dangerous water. He was patient without being soft, funny without demanding laughter, and attentive in a way that made people feel briefly more interesting than they believed themselves to be. He had done that to her 7 years ago. She had not forgiven him for still knowing how. On the second evening, Mara found him standing alone inside her cottage, turning a small carved gull between his fingers. Her father had made it for her as a child. I should have known, Kaylin said. Known what? That 7 years had passed. The wood was pale when I last saw it. Things change color. Your hair is longer. I cut it twice. There is a scar on your thumb. Hook slipped. He set the gull down carefully. I missed all of it. Mara leaned against the table. You did not choose to. That does not give it back. No. He looked at her, and for once neither of them hid behind a joke. Did you wait for me? He asked. The honest answer stood between them. For 2 years, Mara said. Then I became angry enough to stop. Did you marry? No. Something unguarded moved across his face. Relief, followed immediately by shame for feeling it. There was a cooper, she continued, and a schoolmaster from Belhaven. I already dislike both of them. The cooper had excellent shoulders. A serious threat. But he called the Storm Petrel a hobby. A fool, then. Mara smiled despite herself. Kaylin stepped closer. And the schoolmaster? He became seasick on the pier. Hardly his fault. He blamed the pier. Unforgivable. They stood an arm's length apart. The cottage seemed smaller than it had a moment before. Kalen lifted his hand toward the scar on her thumb, then stopped before touching it. "What about you?" Mara asked. "Was there a beautiful elf waiting in every port?" "Several beautiful elves." She rolled her eyes. "None waiting," he said softly. "Not the way you mean." His fingers brushed hers. The compass on the table clicked open by itself. The needle spun once, then pointed between them. Kalen's gaze dropped to her mouth. The harbor warning bell rang. Mara closed her eyes. "I hate that bell." "I am beginning to share the feeling." This time the bell did not warn of an unnatural tide. It announced an elven ship. The bright spear entered Gull's End under white sails that pulled against a wind blowing the other direction. Her hull was narrow, silver-armored, and twice the length of any human vessel in the harbor. 30 elven marines stood along the rail in sea-green uniforms. At the bow was Commander Sarek Vale. Kalen recognized him before the ship lowered its gangplank. "He cut his hair," Kalen said. Mara stood beside him behind a stack of lobster pots. "You sound offended." "It was the only good thing about him." Sarek came ashore with 6 marines. He was a handsome elf in the careful, finished way of a knife. Golden hair cut to his jaw, pale blue eyes, dark green coat buttoned to the throat. A silver device shaped like a curling wave rested against his chest. The tide heart. Even from across the harbor, Mara felt it pulling moisture from the air. Reeve Tomas hurried to meet the commander. "We are searching for wreckage stolen from an admiralty vessel," Sarek announced. "The object is dangerous. We have reason to believe a drowned deserter carried it here." Kalen's hand closed around the hilt of Leo's onion-scented knife. "He wants the village to turn me over," he said. "Tomas will do it before supper if Sarek offers to repair the chicken shed." "I need to get aboard that ship." 30 Marines. 28. 2 at the stern are wind constructs. That improves everything. Mara watched Sarek's eyes move across the harbor. He was not searching randomly. The tide heart at his chest shifted like a living thing, guiding him. "Can it feel your mark?" "Yes." "Then hiding behind pots is temporary." "Do you have a better idea?" Mara looked at the storm petrel resting beyond the east pier. "We go fishing." They left through the old smuggler's channel while Sarek's marines searched the cottages. The channel was barely wider than the storm petrel and vanished at low tide. Mara sailed it by memory, scraping barnacles from the keel while Kalen held the red sail flat to hide it below the rocks. When they reached open water, Gull's End had become a line of gray roofs behind them. "Where are we going?" Kalen asked. "You tell me. You are the dead captain." "The bright spear will expect us to run north toward the elven coast." "So we go south." "There is nothing south except the widow's teeth." "There is a lighthouse." Kalen looked at the clouds gathering over the horizon. "Is it occupied?" "Not since the keeper lost a card game to a ghost." "Human stories improve every time I return." The bright spear appeared behind them before sunset. Her white sails gleamed against the darkening sky. She moved without regard for the wind, closing the distance steadily. Mara tied the tiller and raised more red canvas. "Your mast will not hold," Kalen said. "It knows better than to disappoint me." "Wood rarely responds to threats." "You met the wrong wood." He took the forward line. Together they drove the storm petrel across a rising sea. The widow's teeth waited ahead. 7 black rocks rising from the water, each surrounded by white breakers. Larger vessels avoided them. Mara's father had taught her the channel when she was 12, then made her swear never to use it unless the alternative was death. She had always wondered what counted. The bright spear fired a line of blue magic across their stern. Water exploded beside the rudder. "They are trying to disable us," Kalen said, comforting. Sarek prefers prisoners he can question. Less comforting. Mara aimed the storm petrel at the narrowest gap. Kalen looked from the rocks to her. "That channel is closed." "At high tide." "It is high tide." "Not for another 4 minutes." "The sea is unusually active." "It can wait its turn." They entered the teeth. Black rock passed within arm's reach. Waves broke over the bow. Mara held the tiller with both hands, reading the water by color and foam. Kalen moved wherever her balance needed him before she spoke, easing the sail, shifting weight, trusting her choices. For 7 years, Mara had imagined sailing with him again. In none of those imaginings had an enchanted warship been firing at her stern. She found reality more honest. The storm petrel cleared the final rock as the tide covered the channel. The bright spear tried to follow. Her silver hull struck stone with a sound like a cathedral bell. One white sail tore loose. The ship turned broadside to the waves. Mara laughed into the wind. Kalen stared at her. "What?" "I had forgotten how beautiful you are when you are about to kill someone." Heat rose under her wet collar. "I did not kill them." "Then I am fortunate. You may become even more beautiful." "Hold the line, Captain." He grinned and obeyed. They reached the lighthouse after dark. It stood on a bare stone island, a round black tower attached to a keeper's cottage. The lantern had been cold for years, but the roof remained sound, and a pile of driftwood waited inside. Kalen grew weaker as the tide turned. Mara got him through the door just before his knees failed. "The sea is on every side," she said. "How can this be too far?" "It is not distance tonight. It is anger." "Whose?" The black mark opened over his heart. Hers. Water struck the lighthouse windows, though the tower stood 80 feet above the shore. Kalen folded against the wall. Mara dropped beside him with the compass. "Look at the needle. It will not be enough." "It was enough before." "The keeper knows you are helping me resist." "Then she can come argue with me herself." "She is the sea, Mara." "I have argued with the sea since I was 6. His laugh broke into a cry. The tide marks climbed his throat. His pupils widened until his eyes were almost black. When he looked at Mara again, something else looked through him. "Give him back," said a voice that came from every wall. Mara's fear became very still. "He came to me. He was borrowed." "Then you should have asked before lending him." The tower shook. Kalen's hand slammed against the stone beside her head. He fought to turn away, but water moved beneath his skin, pulling him toward the door. Mara caught his face between her hands, careful not to touch the mark. "Kalen, look at me." His eyes found hers for one heartbeat. "Tell me something the sea does not know." "What?" "Anything." He gasped. "You snore." "I do not." "Like a saw in wet timber." "You were unconscious." "Not all night." The voice in the tower receded slightly. Mara held him tighter. "Tell me another." "You keep your best hooks in a tea tin because Leo steals them. He borrows them." "You hate yellow flowers. They smell like old socks." "You cried when your father gave you the storm petrel." "I had smoke in my eyes." "We were outside." Kalen was himself again now, though his body still shook. Mara became aware that she was kneeling between his legs, her palms against his cheeks, his mouth a breath from hers. "Tell me something else," she whispered. His gaze lowered to her lips. "I wanted to kiss you in the boat shed." 7 years ago? Every minute since. The lighthouse lantern burst into golden flame above them. Mara kissed him. For one startled heartbeat, Kalen did not move. Then his hands found her waist. He kissed her as though 7 lost years had narrowed into that single point of contact. His mouth was cold from the sea and careful for only a moment. Mara slid her fingers into his wet silver hair, and the care broke. He pulled her closer until she felt the hard line of his body, the tremor still passing through him, and the frantic beat beneath the black mark over his heart. The tower groaned around them. Kalen tore his mouth from hers. "I could hurt you." "You were doing a poor job of it." "The keeper was inside me." "She has terrible timing."
"Mara."
She saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear of the sea. Fear of becoming the thing the village believed he was. Mara eased back just enough to breathe. "Did you choose to touch me?"
"Yes."
"Did you choose to kiss me?"
"For 7 years."
"Then choose what happens next. Do not make every decision for the sea." Kalen closed his eyes. His forehead rested against hers.
"I choose you,"
he said. The black mark over his heart tightened from an open circle to a thin, dark ring. Outside, the waves fell quiet. Mara kissed him again, slowly this time. They climbed the lighthouse stairs to the lantern room because it was the driest place on the island. Golden flame moved inside the great glass lens without oil or wick. Whenever Kalen touched Mara, the light brightened. They sat with their backs against the curved wall, wrapped in an old keeper's blanket. The storm moved farther out to sea. "What happened in the boat shed?" Mara asked. Kalen's thumb traced the scar on her hand.
"You truly need me to explain?"
"I remember a torn sail and an elf who talked for 2 hours without saying what he wanted."
"I was attempting restraint."
"You were hiding behind canvas."
"Your father was 20 feet away sharpening a knife."
"He sharpened knives when he liked people."
"That detail would have been useful."
Mara rested her head against his shoulder. For years, she had trained herself not to imagine this weight, this voice close to her ear, this hand linked with hers. Having him beside her felt less like a dream than the end of one. "You will outlive me," she said. Kalen went still. That is what humans always say when they consider loving an elf. Because it is true. Yes. I will grow old while you look like this. I may improve. She elbowed him. He caught her hand and pressed his mouth to her knuckles. Mara, I lost 7 years and felt every missing hour when you told me. I will not refuse the years I can have because they are fewer than I want. You make that sound simple. It will not be simple. It will be worth the difficulty. Those are different things. The wind turned the lantern slowly around them. Gold swept across his face, vanished, and returned. Mara touched the dark ring over his heart. It was cool now, no longer dragging her mind beneath the waves. We still have to keep you alive. That has never been my strongest talent. Then listen to the expert. You slapped a drowned man. He woke up. Kalen laughed softly and kissed her hair. They slept in the lantern room with the blanket wrapped around both of them. Mara woke before dawn to find Kalen's face against her neck and his arm firm around her waist. For the first time in 7 years, the place beside her did not feel like an absence. The bright spear surrounded the island at sunrise. 2 launches approached the lighthouse from opposite sides. Sarek stood in the bow of the first, the tide heart shining at his throat. "Captain Reese!" His voice carried over the water. "Admiral Valor offers clemency if you surrender peacefully." Kalen looked through the lantern glass. He has always confused clemency with a shorter execution. Mara examined the rocks below. The storm petrel was tied in the narrow eastern inlet, hidden from the larger ship, but not from the approaching launches. "How long can you hold off 12 Marines?" "On stairs?" "Yes." "Longer than they will enjoy." "Good. Do that." "What are you doing?" Mara opened the lantern housing. "Winning an argument with the sun." The first Marines reached the lighthouse door. Kalen descended to meet them with Leo's knife in one hand and a length of iron chain in the other. The stairway was too narrow for more than one attacker at a time. Steel rang below. Mara turned the great lens toward the bright spear. The golden flame inside it gathered morning light and condensed it into a brilliant line. She aimed at the warship's forward sail. The enchanted cloth did not burn. It expanded. Wind flooded it from the wrong direction. The bright spear lurched backward, dragging both launches sideways by their tether ropes. Marines shouted. One boat overturned close enough to shore that its occupants stood waist-deep and furious. Kalen appeared at the lantern room door with a split lip and an elven sword he had not owned moments before. "Remind me never to argue with you at sunrise." "You already argued with me at sunset. I was distracted by your mouth." The lighthouse shook as magic struck its base. They ran. An old drainage stair spiraled from the keeper's cottage to a cave beneath the island. Mara had found it years ago while hiding from a storm with her father. The storm petrel waited beyond a curtain of spray. Kalen cut the line, Mara raised the sail, and they shot from the cave as Sarek reached the cliff above. His pale eyes met Kalen's. He did not order the Marines to fire. That troubled Mara more than if he had. The storm petrel returned to Gull's End under fog. They found the village occupied. Admiralty Marines guarded the pier. The net house had become a temporary prison for Leo, Reeve Tomas, and 9 fishermen who had refused to answer questions. Elven flags flew above the harbor office. Mara lowered the sail outside the reef. "This is my fault," Kalen said. "Valor raised our taxes and stole our wind before you came back. You are merely the first piece of his theft to wash ashore. He will punish them to reach me." Then we stop letting him choose the direction. They waited until night and entered the harbor, swimming beneath an overturned dinghy. Kalen moved through the water without making a ripple. Mara kicked beside him, trying not to think about what might be looking back from below. They reached the net house unseen. Leo stared when Mara lifted the floor hatch. "You kissed him," he said. Mara nearly dropped the key. "What?" "You have the face." "What face?" "The one you had after the Cooper with the shoulders." Kalen leaned through the hatch. "I dislike this conversation." "Good," Leo said. "I dislike your entire species." "Quiet," Mara told them both. They freed the prisoners. Reeve Tomas immediately offered to guide the Marines toward Kalen in exchange for mercy. Leo locked him back inside. The fishermen gathered in Mara's boat shed while patrols searched the village. Kalen spread a chart across an overturned barrel. "The bright spear cannot keep the tide hard in Gull's End. Its pull will disturb the harbor. Sarek will take it west to meet Valor's flagship by morning." "Then we steal it before morning," Mara said. Old Esben scratched his beard. "From 30 elves?" 28, Leo said. "Apparently 2 are imaginary." Kalen looked at Mara. "You told him?" "It seemed useful." Mara set lead net weights on the chart. The bright spear uses enchanted sails to pull wind, but she still needs a rudder and lines. At first light, the herring fleet leaves through the western channel. We leave with it.
The Marines will search every boat, said Esben.
Let them. Kaelin will not be aboard.
Every face turned toward the elf. He smiled slowly. You intend to put me in the water?
You said it makes you stronger.
I like her, Esben announced.
You tried to inspect my gums yesterday.
A man can change.
Their plan required every working net in Gull's End, 6 fishing boats, 2 barrels of rotting herring, the lighthouse's spare signal mirror, and Reeve Tomas's blue festival coat. The coat was not essential, but Leo insisted. At dawn, the human fleet sailed under Admiralty inspection. Marines opened holds, stabbed piles of rope, and complained about the smell of herring. They did not notice Kaelin clinging beneath the Storm Petrel's hull with the compass tied to his wrist. Beyond the reef, the 6 boats spread toward the fishing grounds. The bright spear followed. Sarek knew they were lying. Mara saw it in the angle of his sail and the patient distance he kept. He wanted them far enough from the village before he struck. So did she. When Gull's End vanished behind the cliffs, Mara raised a red flag. The human boats turned at once. Weighted nets flew across the bright spear's bow. 1 fell short. 2 caught the silver rail. The 4th spread beneath the water and wrapped around the rudder. The enchanted ship tried to turn. Her own wind drove her sideways. Leo launched the first barrel of herring from a deck sling. It burst across the white forward sail in a shining brown wave. Even Kaelin, climbing over the stern, paused to stare.
Was that necessary? He shouted.
No, Leo shouted back. Marines rushed the rail. Human fishermen did not fight like soldiers. They ducked behind masts, pulled lines, threw hooks, and made the deck impossible to cross. Kaelin moved among them like the captain he had once been, using the flat of a stolen blade and the shifting deck rather than killing blows. Mara boarded from the Storm Petrel with a gutting knife between her teeth. Sarek waited beside the mainmast. The Tideheart rested against his chest, swirling silver and blue beneath a cage of wire.
Mara Fenn, he said. I wondered what kind of woman could pull a dead man home.
The busy kind. She threw her knife. Sarek turned. The blade cut the chain at his neck instead of his throat. The Tideheart fell. Mara caught it. The world became water. She saw ships from 100 centuries crossing the same sea. She saw sailors pour wine over their bows and promise not to bind the wind. She saw Admiral Valor lift a living pearl from a trench while the ocean screamed. Then she saw Kaelin on the drowned reach, kneeling among the bodies of his crew, and offering the keeper below the only thing he still owned: his life. Mara returned to the deck with the Tideheart burning in her palm. Kaelin reached her.
Are you hurt?
She struck him with her free hand. His head snapped sideways. You promised her your life. Silence opened around them despite the fighting. Kaelin's face changed.
Mara.
You knew returning this would kill you.
I knew it might.
Do not insult me with a smaller lie. The bright spear's sails went slack. Every wave around the ship flattened. Sarek backed toward the mast. You should give me the heart. Mara closed both hands around it. You should learn to swim. A horn sounded from the west. Admiral Valor's flagship emerged from a fold in the air. The Dominion was enormous, black-hulled and armored with silver plates. 3 rows of enchanted sails climbed her masts. At the high stern stood Admiral Valor Sen in white and gold, one hand raised around a crystal wind rod. He looked older than Kalen by several centuries, his hair iron gray, and his face elegant enough to belong on a coin. Behind him waited archers and a full company of Marines. "Captain Reese," Valor called across the still water, "you have made a spectacle of your treason." Kalen moved in front of Mara. "Admiral, you have made a business of yours." Valor's gaze found the Tideheart. Hunger broke through his calm expression. "Return Admiralty property and I will spare the humans." "You stole it from the sea," Mara said. "The sea owns nothing. It consumes. Civilized people give resources purpose." Water began running upward along the Dominion's hull. Valor did not notice. "Your purpose emptied our nets," Mara said. "It wrecked boats that could not pay you and starved ports you never visited." A fisherwoman does not understand the balance of nations. "Perhaps, but I understand what happens when one greedy man takes more than the boat can carry." She threw the Tideheart to Kalen. He caught it against the black ring over his heart. The sea opened. A circle of darkness spread beneath both elven ships. Stars appeared in it, though morning had come. Broken masts rose from the water. Bells rang far below. The drowned Reach had found them. Sarek went white. "What have you done?" "Finished our voyage," Kalen said. The Dominion fired. Bolts of compressed wind tore across the Brightspear's deck. One struck the mainmast. Silverwood split above Mara and Kalen. He covered her with his body as the mast fell. The deck rolled beneath them. Human fishermen leaped back to their boats. Admiralty Marines abandoned weapons and reached for lines. The dark water pulled all three ships toward its center. Kalen pressed the Tideheart into Mara's hands. "Take the Storm Petrel and sail east." "No. The Reach will close when the heart is returned." "Then we return it together." "You saw the bargain." "I saw you make it alone. You do not get to keep making decisions that belong to both of us." "Your life does not belong to me." "Exactly. I choose where to risk it." His green eyes searched hers. Around them, the bright spear broke apart by inches. "I love you," he said. Mara had imagined those words in 100 quieter places. None had included rotten herring, falling masts, or an opening in the world. "Good," she said. "Then stop trying to leave me." She kissed him once, hard, and dragged him toward the Storm Petrel. Leo had cut the fishing boats free. They raced east ahead of the pull, while Mara and Kalen turned west into it. "Mara!" Leo screamed across the water. She did not look back. If she saw her brother's face, she might remember that survival was sometimes the braver choice. The Storm Petrel entered the drowned Reach. Day vanished. They sailed beneath a sky with no moon and over water filled with stars. Wrecks drifted around them from ages no history remembered. Human longboats, elven silver ships, vessels carved from bone, ships with sails of red feathers. Pale figures watched from their decks. The Tideheart pulsed in time with Kalen's mark. "Where do we take it?" Mara asked. "The center." "Everything is the center here." "That is the difficulty." The compass needle spun. Then it pointed down. Mara looked over the side. Miles below, a light answered. Kalen tied a rope around his waist. "What are you doing?" "The heart must cross the last distance in living hands." "How far?" "Far enough." "That is not a measurement." He cupped the back of her neck and brought his forehead to hers. "I do not know if the rope will hold." "Then we use two." "Mara, 2 ropes." The drowned Reach whispered around them. The pale crews leaned closer.
Kalen touched the compass tied at his wrist. If I do not return, I will come after you. That is the opposite of what I was going to say. Then say something better. His mouth trembled into a smile. Keep the door open. He took the tied heart and stepped over the rail. The rope raced through Mara's hands. Kalen's silver hair vanished beneath the black surface. Blue light traveled downward, smaller and smaller, until it became another star. Mara braced both feet against the mast. The rope stopped. For one moment, nothing happened. Then it pulled. Not the steady weight of a body, a violent downward wrench that dragged Mara across the deck. She wrapped the line around the mast. The storm petrel tipped until water poured over the rail. Wood groaned. The second rope snapped. Mara saw Kalen in her mind, his body suspended above the glowing trench, while dark hands closed around his ankles. His bargain was collecting him. She cut the rope from the mast and tied it around her own waist. "This is a terrible idea," she told the boat. The storm petrel creaked agreement. Mara jumped. Cold erased the world. The tied heart's light formed a clear sphere around her head. She could breathe, though every instinct insisted she was drowning. The rope pulled her through black water past Kalen's drifting body. She caught his hand. His eyes opened. "You were told to leave," said the keeper below. The voice moved through Mara's bones. "He tells me many foolish things." The darkness took shape. A woman larger than a ship rose from the trench, made of current, whalebone, storm cloud, and the pale lights of creatures that never saw the sun. Her hair spread through the sea for miles. One eye held summer water. The other held every shipwreck. The elf pledged his life until the heart was returned. Theft requires payment. Take it from the thief. Above them, Admiral Valor clung to the broken stern of the Dominion as the Reach pulled his flagship down. His hands still held the crystal windrod. He ordered the taking. The elf captain failed to restore what was stolen. He tried for 7 years. 6 weeks, said the keeper. You count badly. The summer eye narrowed. Mara's lungs tightened inside the sphere of light. Kalen squeezed her hand, warning her to stop. She did not. You kept him where time did not move, then blamed him for being late. That sounds like an admiralty contract. The deep water shook. Was that amusement in it? Mara could not tell. Kalen lifted the tied heart. Take it. Let her go. The keeper reached toward him. Mara put herself between the enormous hand and his chest. The heart first, then the bargain ends. Mortal, you command the sea. No, I am reminding it to keep its word. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the keeper smiled. The expression caused storms 300 miles away. Small creature, you would make a troublesome tide. I am a fisherwoman. Mara took the tied heart from Kalen and released it. The pearl sank into the keeper's open palm. Light exploded through the trench. Every current Valor had bound tore free. Wind rushed across the world. Fishing grounds shifted back toward old coasts. The pale wrecks of the drowned Reach lifted their sails as one, their lost crews finally turning toward whatever shore waited beyond death. The black ring over Kalen's heart broke. Blue lines peeled from his skin and became ribbons of light. But as they left, Kalen began to sink. Mara grabbed him beneath the arms. The bargain is over! It is. Then help me. The sea does not return everything it takes. You returned the herring? Again, that deep, impossible amusement. One current rose beneath them.
Mara held Kaelin as they were thrown upward through miles of water. The compass needle spun between them, no longer pointing to her or down, but north at last. They broke the surface beneath an ordinary morning sky. The storm petrel floated 10 yards away. Mara dragged Kaelin to the boat. He was not breathing. Not again. She hauled him over the rail, climbed after him, and pressed both hands to his chest. You do not get 2 funerals. Once. Twice. Again. Seawater spilled from his mouth. I am charging you for the floorboards. Again. And the sail. Again. And 7 years of bad sleep. Kaelin coughed. Mara struck him in the chest with both fists, then folded over him, laughing and sobbing at once. His arms came around her weakly. That welcome was warmer, he whispered. She kissed him until he stopped trying to speak. The Dominion and Bright Spear emerged from the closing reach without their enchanted sails. Both ships drifted helplessly on an honest wind. Admiral Valor was alive. So was Sarek. The freed Admiralty sailors bound them before Kaelin and Mara returned to Gull's End. Without the Tideheart bending every route to his favor, Valor discovered how quickly loyalty changed direction. The human fishing boats found the storm petrel near noon. Leo boarded first. He looked at Mara, looked at Kaelin, and punched the elf in the shoulder. That was not deserved, Kaelin said. I had 7 years saved up. Then Leo pulled him into an embrace strong enough to make his pointed ears turn red. Gull's End greeted them with every bell in the village. For weeks the coast changed. The stolen winds returned to their natural paths. Elven ships learned to wait for weather. Human boats reached fishing grounds that had been empty for a generation. Harbor toll records recovered from the Dominion exposed Valor's private empire, and even the Elven Crown found it difficult to ignore ledgers signed in the Admiral's hand. Sarek testified in exchange for his life. Mara did not forgive him. Kaelin did not ask her to. The Admiralty offered Kaelin his old rank, a new ship, and 3 medals for surviving an event it had officially denied. He declined all 4. There were only 3 offers, Mara said. I declined the speech as well. Kaelin stayed in Gull's End. At first, the villagers called him the Drowned Captain. Then children shortened it to Captain Drown, which he hated. By winter, he was simply Kaelin, the elf who repaired rigging too neatly and bought plum liquor despite claiming it was terrible. He moved into Mara's cottage slowly. First came a dry coat beside the door, then 2 books on her shelf, then a silver razor near the wash basin and a pair of boots that always blocked the stove. One morning, Mara realized he had occupied half her life without ever carrying a trunk across the threshold. You are a very gradual invader, she told him. I was waiting for formal permission. Your boots have permission to live outside. Cruel. He sailed with her on the Storm Petrel, but he never called himself captain aboard her boat. When passengers made the mistake, he pointed at Mara. Her deck, he said. Her word. In spring, humans and elves gathered at Gull's End to renew the covenant with the sea. No one bound the wind. Every fleet pledged to restore what it took. Mara stood as the human coast's witness. Kaelin stood beside her, his hand warm and living around hers. The dark mark over his heart was gone. Only a pale ring remained. He could cross inland now. He could sleep through the turn of the tide. He could stand in rain without hearing the keeper call his name. But he never lost his respect for doors. One evening, almost a year after the storm, Mara returned from the harbor and found him waiting outside their cottage. He wore his best dark green coat. His silver hair was tied back. In one hand, he held her father's brass compass. In the other, he carried a small wooden box.
Why are you standing outside?
She asked. I am attempting to arrive properly. You live here. That has never stopped you from making rules. He knocked 3 times. Mara folded her arms, though she could not hide her smile. Who is it? A sailor. Living or dead? I have become strongly attached to the first option. What does the sailor want? Kaylin opened the box. Inside lay a ring made from silver and dark sea glass. A tiny compass rose had been carved into its surface. He wants to know whether the fisherwoman who became his last direction will also become every shore after it. Mara's eyes burned. That is too many sailor words. I prepared a shorter version. Let's hear it. His confidence disappeared. The immortal elf who had faced the keeper below looked suddenly, wonderfully uncertain. May I come home, Marafen? She stepped across the threshold, caught the front of his coat, and kissed him beneath the porch lantern. You already did, she whispered. Behind them, the compass needle held steady. Below the cliffs, the sea came and went without owning either of them. If you believe love can become a light strong enough to guide even the most lost soul home, subscribe to Elf Romance. Tell us in the comments which moment stayed with you, and return for more original fantasy love stories.